Right, on behalf of the Institute's Practice Committee, a very good and warm afternoon. Welcome to you. It's been rather cold and chilly for most of us, I'm sure. My name is Eugene Barnard. Thank you very much for joining. We look forward to another enjoyable and interesting Friday afternoon together. Welcome to Corina Gibson once again from ECPD, who does so much for SAIAshare, and behind the scenes also to Marlene van Nieuwenhuizen, who works tirelessly to promote SAIAshare, and also welcome to our interim practice manager, Maria Piccini. And then thank you once again to Angelique Pillay and Duravit for their generous sponsorship. Welcome, Angelique. Colleagues, please participate in the event by posting questions or comments in the questions box. If you have any suggestions on future topics or on potential presenters, feel free to note them in the questions box. In session 2 this afternoon, we're going to be listening to Bram de Villiers from Earthworld Architects, who will be addressing the interesting topic, architecture is a hollowed out profession, with architects seemingly less vital than ever. But first, I'm pleased to introduce you to someone who most of you would have come across already, Uwe Putlitz. Uwe is a professional architect and a professional construction project manager. He has experience in FIDIC, GCC, JBCC, and NEC, Standard Forms of Contract, and the PROXA Professional Services Agreement. He has lectured in principles of design and planning, construction technology, and commercial procedures. He has also presented the building module of the WITS plus SAPOA property management programs for the past approximately 10 years. Uwe was appointed CEO of JBCC in 2010 until his retirement in 2019. He has a degree in building, an MSc building, and a degree in architecture, a BArch, from the University of the Witwatersrand. Uwe is retired in the Southern Cape, apart from relaxing, he also remains involved in consulting in the industry. Uwe is eminently qualified to speak on how to be a better principal agent and reduce your risks. So Uwe, thank you for joining us once again, and it's over to you.
Eugene, good afternoon. Good afternoon to the audience. Thank you very much for that introduction. I think I should appoint you as my PR agent. The reason we're here today is that in my decade or thereabouts at the JBCC, there was a facility called Frequently Asked Questions, and there was usually a question virtually every working day. And most of those related to the architect or the principal agent not being fully au fait with what the contract is all about, and to a lesser extent contractors as well. Now, my interest is really not to go and criticize anybody. My interest these days, and that applies to all the new contracts, is to try and avoid disputes. But you do need to have the knowledge to do that. What we've done to make sure we fit into the time allowed is that I've recorded my presentation, which we'll play in a moment. And then, of course, I'll be available afterwards to deal with any possible questions you may have. So sit back and enjoy it, and don't nod off. There's a lot of information to absorb. Thank you. Hello, I'm Uwe Putlitz. I would like to talk to you about being an effective principal agent. A little bit of background to that. I was the CEO of the JBCC for about a decade until 5 years ago. And in addition to a lot of training, I was involved in answering about 3,500 email questions over that period, one a day, not all of those in one day. And most of those dealt with poor administration of the contract and that the persons using it weren't fully familiar with what their obligations were. This included not issuing the right paperwork at the right time, not dealing with meetings properly, and not following the procedures when it comes to claims, and poor document control, a subject that Stan Siegel dealt with earlier in the year. So in this discussion, we're not really concerned about who does what in terms of qualifications or what the fees are. Those are all gazetted elsewhere. But I'd like to clarify the difference in the role between the architect, the principal consultant, the construction project manager, the construction manager, and the construction health and safety officer. All of those need to be registered in terms of the various councils, and they all have unique specified job descriptions. Let's go and have a look at a diagram of who does what sort of thing. And most of us with a background in architecture think we can be consultants and all the others rolled into one. If you look at the role of the architect under the red arrow and the key on top in the right-hand corner, who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, who's consulted and who's informed, you'll see that the architect's role is not one where he's involved in every one of the stages, and that the principal consultant or the project manager, or in our case, the principal agent, go and take over part of that role. Now you need to know what you are appointed for, and this is where the PROXA document is very useful because it describes the obligations of the architect, the principal consultant, the principal agent, or for that matter, any one of the other consultants who may well become the principal agent in detail, what your obligations are and what your deliverables are. And this is important to recognize what you've been appointed for and what you're going to get paid for and what you become responsible for when things go wrong. Let's have a look at the principal consultant. He or she is primarily responsible with sorting out the design and all the documentation, the coordination of the work of the various consultants, and producing the documentation so that you can go out to tender. That person would also be responsible for setting a policy for communication, how you deal with meetings, how procurement is done, which may vary from job to job, the involvement of a health and safety person at an early stage, and the choice of a particular form of contract that is appropriate for the project at hand. And one very other important criteria is professional indemnity assurance, that whoever is involved in this project is adequately and appropriately insured for the project. The principal agent's role is quite different. And the best part is if you look at the JBCC contract, the employer warrants that the principal agent has full authority and obligation to act and bind the employer in terms of this agreement. So this happens in the construction phase, not in the design phase. Then important to recognize that the principal agent has no authority to amend this agreement. In other words, you can't go and rewrite the text that's there. You have certain obligations. You may sign contract instructions and certificates. You may not revise a certificate. You do not mediate in a disagreement between the parties, which is the case in FEDIC, GCC, and NEC, and you may not suspend or terminate the contractor's appointment. And you may not instruct acceleration or enforce penalties. Obviously, the items like termination and acceleration and penalties will have to be instructed after they have been agreed with the client. Now, that authority means you can go and sign certain documents on behalf of the employer. And if you just happen to look at the JBCC payment certificate form, it says at the bottom, signed by the principal agent who, as agent of the employer, certifies that the amount certified above is due and payable by the date stated. And that is the important criteria. That makes this a liquid document, and the liquid document is a tool that the contractor, in this case, can go to court and enforce payment if he hasn't been paid in terms of the contract that he has signed. The principal agent also has to account for all his actions to the employer or the client, even if his appointment is terminated up to that point, and share the records that he has produced regarding the works at no additional fee at that stage. And there's ample case law to go and substantiate that. An important criterion to be aware of is the definition of what an agent does. An agent has delegated authority to represent the employer in addition to rendering a professional consulting service, as distinct from a consultant who provides a stipulated service or provides expert advice professionally. By not appointing consultants timeously, that may cause delays or changes or abortive work. An important part is to set a communication strategy right at the beginning of the project. And the first important criterion is who has authority to act on behalf of various people. So in the case of the principal agent, is you're acting on behalf of the employer or the client. If you're the contractor, then you need to be acting on behalf of the managing director, if that's the case. That you have a format for dealing with communications, a filing system, and a backup system, that documents are put together in a certain way, that you have a method statement that says what you do and how you do it. And very important with that sort of document, that at the bottom or wherever it says page 1 of so many pages, that you can identify if they're missing pages. When it comes to drawings, architects are very often a bit lax in that department. There's a very good guide published by the engineers, what should be contained in the title block, and that is a block which says prepared by and the person and what his qualification is, and checked by a person who must go and say who he or she is and what his or her qualifications are. And this is particularly important when you end up with disputes whether the documentation was issued was correct or appropriate for the purpose. You need to be acutely aware of misinformation and disinformation, and you must have a way of tracing records. This is something that FIDIC in the current edition highlights particularly. And please don't confuse any private information with business information as the job progresses. If you look at the JBCC agreement, you will see there is a list of actions and instructions that the principal agent needs to carry out, and it's a large number that you're looking at there, about 70 odd events that need to be dealt with during the execution of a job. So it is quite a responsible job that the principal agent has, and it's not a part-time job. Now, things can go wrong. And the first important one is that both you and the employer understand what you've been appointed for, what you've not been appointed for, so that that is clear. The next important one is that the employer may lose money or income because you haven't done something. Alternatively, the employer may be the one who causes delays and or costs by not making up his or her mind or asking for late instructions to be changed. A contractor may in turn have a claim for delays where the employer has delayed him, and that may be due to late appointment of professionals or the issue of information, and it needs to be correct information and it needs to be issued timeously. It may also include the review of information provided by subcontractors, late issue of payment certificates, not to mention late payment, and then dealing with claims as and when those have been submitted, and that claims are also assessed in the time that is provided for in the contract. The next most important item to look at is the program. There are a variety of programs, but we're dealing with a construction program, and this is the one that's prepared by the contractor. The principal agent must accept the contractor's program. He can't interfere in it, but he can ask questions. And that program is updated regularly at regular progress meetings. It is revised if there's been a revision to the date of practical completion. Thereafter, it is updated again at regular intervals. The critical path, it's important to recognize that it's not only one critical path, there may be more than one. Normally, if the critical path is revised, it means an extension of time, but it doesn't automatically mean that that applies. RAIN, there's this thinking that you need to have all sorts of statistics and so on. The feeling generally is, can the contractor work or can he not work safely? And depending on the amount of rain, it may be impossible to do foundation work, but the same quantum of rain when the building is waterproof doesn't warrant an extension of time. Acceleration may be relevant at certain times, but that is not a decision that the principal agent would make on his own, and if it is decided to be done, then a formal instruction must be issued by the principal agent. Now, disputes generally arise because we haven't got information, and that means we've got to go and issue instructions, we've got to issue minutes, we've got to record all the information of a job as quickly as we can and circulate it to all the relevant parties. If something is disputed, deal with it as and when you are aware or made aware of it. Site instructions should only be there to clarify what's in the specifications or the drawing, not to change the scope of the work, which you shouldn't do anyway. And if there is a need for any instructions, those must be issued by the principal agent as a contract instruction in the formal way. And theoretically, that should also include the work of all the other consultants, that those are formal contract instructions, numbered sequentially, costed, and all the rest of it. That all drawings need to be issued as a contract instruction or under cover of a contract instruction. And be aware of the fact that minutes cannot be changed. You can, at subsequent meetings, say were the minutes correct or not correct, and you can record that this or that item should read whatever the correct wording is, but you cannot go back and alter minutes. The JBCC, nor do the other contracts for that matter, don't provide a pro forma contract instruction form. The RIBA have got quite a neat one on the left-hand side. The one that I used to use in practice is the one on the right, where you refer to the contract clauses in terms of which an instruction is issued, and that at the foot of the instruction you've got a list of all the consultants who need to be copied. Now, I've spoken about standard form contracts a couple of times. There's an ISO definition that it's a document that contains the detailed provisions incorporated in a contract, laying down the rights and duties of the parties, the functions of the people connected with the contract, and the procedures for administering the contract. That's all good and well, and it is quite correct. The definition that I'm rather keen on is one that says a standard form is supposed to be just that. It loses value of those using it, or at tender stage, those intending to use it have to look outside it for deviations to the standard. And this is very important, and this is where people very often think we can change the standard form of contract. It doesn't only apply to JBCC, it applies to all of them. And that invariably causes problems, because usually contradictions result in the process that you invalidate what you're actually trying to achieve. So please do not change the wording in any of the standard form contracts. And if you really, really have to, then it needs to be done in a way that it is advertised as part of the tender conditions, that it's included in the contract data to say in clause so-and-so that this is added or omitted or whatever the case may be, that the contractor at the time of tender can decide whether he or she is prepared to accept that, or if that changes the risk profile of that particular project, and it may become an unacceptable risk to tender under those conditions. Now, all of the contracts also provide for dispute resolution in some form or another. And the state, particularly in the past, has always been very keen to go straight to court, which costs an enormous amount of money and takes many years. There's a particularly important quotation from a case a couple of years ago in the UK, where Lord Hoffman stated that justice is not priceless, and that in the light of the burden which a long and complicated trial would impose upon the defendant, it would, even if its resources were infinite, be wrong to permit this case to proceed to trial. This is important. This is why all the agreements have got the options of dispute resolution through talking to one another, mediation, adjudication, or arbitration. They get progressively more time-consuming and progressively more expensive, but if the parties can talk to one another, you should all carry on as friends and produce a project that is satisfactory to all involved. Well, I hope this has been useful to you. I'll gladly try and answer any questions that might have arisen from what I've been trying to share with you. Thank you very much.
Right, Uwe, please join me. Thank you. You covered a lot of ground there in a short, compact presentation. Uwe, thank you very, very much for that oversight. And yes, I believe that this recording will be available, colleagues. So it would be worth your while, I think, to go onto either ECPD or the SAIA website in a few weeks' time and just have another look at it. We're inviting questions on the role of the principal agent and how to reduce risks, but maybe just to kickstart the discussion. Many, if not most, of the attendees today would be architectural professionals, and you know, we do traditionally believe that we are also good principal agents, but it is sometimes very convenient to have a principal agent, and we can sit back and relax and focus on architecture per se. But from your perspective, what are the mistakes that architects make, or are there any particular points of advice other than the technical issues that you can give to architects to watch out for if they are principal agents and architects?
I think the reason why most of us chose this as a career is that we've been fascinated by design and how buildings have come about. And I think that remains our primary interest generally, is the design and the implementation thereof. Many of us are not that good doing the administration, and I think that's where things usually go wrong, that we don't do enough of the paperwork, which is fine if nothing goes wrong. And quite frankly, if we all get on fine together and we have a handshake, that's a binding contract. But fortunately, that doesn't always apply in the real world. And when the brown stuff hits you, you know what? You need to go and have the evidence in the form of minutes, photographs, recordings, or whatever the case may be. And you need to follow the procedures in the various agreements to try and be fair to both sides. And obviously, the architect isn't always the innocent party. Sometimes he's part of the problem. Very often the clients are actually the problem, that they don't really know what they want and they don't understand it sufficiently. And maybe that is a failing of the architect sometimes, to go and say, did I really understand you correctly? Or are you sure that this is what you'd like me to do, or what your expectation is of the final product? Just to double check these things. And the more you can get into the brief and agreed by everybody, the better. If you haven't got a comprehensive brief and people start thinking about things as you go along, and try to, especially if you're doing residential work, which I've always tried to avoid, have you seen this article in this magazine? Can we have a whatever when the roof is about to go on? That's not the best way to run a job.
Right. Okay. Uwe, we do have some questions coming in. Right. Tariro, thank you for your comment. That was a lot of information in such a short time. Would love to attend more webinars on the role of the PA. Yes, do look out for them, Tariro. Zach Jefferson, and this is something that you can just explain to us, Uwe. He wants to know what the difference is between a contract instruction and a site instruction. You muted, Uwe. Corina, can you help?
Uwe's internet signal has dropped a little bit. Uwe, just carry on talking for me a moment. Unmute your mic. Oh, okay. We still haven't got him back.
Okay. Maybe I can try and help there, Uwe. Zak, when you're on site and you need to clarify any aspect of any technical aspect on site, traditionally you would have a site instruction book in which you can then give more information on what needs to be done. Uwe, are you audible yet? No, not yet. Sorry. So site instruction would not have a cost implication necessarily, but a contract instruction is a formal instruction to the contractor, in terms of which you then would indicate what the instruction is to the contractor, be it, let's say, a change to something specific in the specification. What is the cost? Is there a cost implication? Might there be a time implication? And that is a register that is used with which to prepare a final account and a cost report. Uwe, anything you want to add there? I don't know whether I've got it spot on, but thanks, Corina. Yeah, I think we're going to carry on because quite a few questions have now come through. Let me just open up the questions box again. Okay, Uwe, do you want to get back to the first question that Zak asked regarding the difference between a site instruction and a contract instruction?
I think you summed up correctly that it's really only to clarify things that are on site, but it's not there to vary from what needs to be done. And it shouldn't have any time or cost implications. And that is where you want to go and have a formal way of communicating. And that's where the contract instruction comes in, that you've got a record of these things and you can evaluate those. And if necessary, the contractor can come back to say, with that contract instruction, I need to apply for an extension of time, if that were to apply, for instance.
Okay, thanks, Uwe. Then our next question comes from Siyei Sitole. What is the difference between a lead or principal consultant and a principal agent?
Okay, the principal consultant deals with the first 2.5, 3 work stages to sort out the design, sort out the documentation, and prepare the documentation for procurement, and usually is still involved with assessing the procurement. The principal agent is responsible for the execution of the works. The principal agent's appointment might come a little earlier to go to assist with the procurement by sharing advice and experiences and so on. But the principal agent needs to get it built, the principal consultant needs to get it put on paper.
Great, thanks. Pete Bakker asks a very pertinent question. How can architects best deal with the situation where a principal agent inserts herself between the architect and the client to the detriment of the design discussion?
That's a difficult one. Essentially, the roles of all the professionals should be clarified right at the beginning from the appointment, and that the architect understands that he is, in this scenario, not the principal in every respect. He's got a job to do, which is to sort out the design and to get it designed properly. And depending on his appointment, he may or may not be responsible for the construction of it. I suppose the whole reason on larger projects is that the roles have been segregated to go and maximize the experience of people, and that you do what you're best at. And unfortunately, it's often true that good designers are poor administrators, and very often the lazy designers are good administrators. Slight generalization, but sort of applies.
Okay. Well, thanks, Pete. Good luck there. Tubani Umedi wants to know, what is the appropriate way to handle consultants who are not performing? who are not responding to requests for drawings and information?
Unfortunately, this is back to the administration. You've got to go and in writing give them a notice to say that you need to do. You've all got you're part of the design design program. You know what needs to be done when. You've subscribed it to it. You were party or should have been party to it. And if there are any consequences like delays to the contractor, you might be held responsible for those.
And can I just add? Can I add to that? What's important is you need coordination meetings right up front, and you need to agree on documentation, dates, programs, and you've got to be relentless. If someone is late, you've got to, as you say, issue a notice and just warn the person that any costs caused by the delay will be for the professional's account. Then Zach, in assessing a claim by the contractor, how do you best avoid bias in your decision if acting as an agent of the employer, assuming that you know also the architect? How do you best avoid bias in your decision?
The difficulty has always been that the employer appoints the architect and pays his fee. That doesn't mean you've got to protect him at all costs, even if he's the guilty party. So you've got to separate the two to go and say, this is what my appointment is for, what you've done in the proxy agreement, what says you need to do this or that, or something may not be included, which may be relevant. And if it relates to the construction side, you've got to be quite clear what caused the problem. Was it the employer by changing his mind, asking for things later on, and saying that you were actually the cause of the delay. Therefore, we've done this to try and mitigate the effect of, but you are still responsible for the total effect. But you've got to be neutral, and the fact that you get paid by the employer doesn't mean you can't go and criticize him and point out to him where his or her ways were the ones that caused the problem.
Thanks, Uwe. Ken asks, Ken Lieber, could you clarify the validity of recorded discussions or social media, i.e. WhatsApp, etc., as opposed to emails? I don't know whether you can comment on recorded discussions, social media like WhatsApp, and as opposed to emails.
The Electronic Communications and Transactions Act from, it is quite a while ago, 2000 or thereabouts, recognizes all the social medias, and email is one of the electronic communication media, and so is WhatsApp. I think those are accepted. You can also say in your tender documentation, for instance, that only emails will be acceptable, or these days almost all jobs run on WhatsApp communications. You can include or exclude Facebook, for instance, or Telegram or Insta, whatever. Those you can limit, and Public Works has always insisted that it must be, in the old days, a fax or an email. The fax has sort of been consigned to the museum these days. The other important criterion is if you use these media to record things, that you can record meetings on your mobile phone, for instance. You've actually got to highlight at the beginning that you're going to record this, and that everybody is in agreement that this is going to be recorded.
Okay, thanks.
So they're all valid.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Colleagues, I'm going to try and rush through risks and responsibilities of risks. This comes from Ryan van der Vyver. I would expect all designers on the project to identify potential designers' risk on the project, and where is this captured in the process? ? In the UK, there is a clear obligation for designers to identify and mitigate risks to the design. Question is prompted by one of your earlier slides regarding responsibility matrix. would that relate more to occupational health and safety and the agent there, or not necessarily?
No, that is just one aspect of it, and it applies to all the professions and the construction guys at the same time. And it's clearly spelled out in the SA Construction Project Management documentation that's been issued by that council, that it applies to all the professions. And I think if you read the Architects Act, it's there as well, that you need to go and assess all the different risks on the project. What's the likelihood of something occurring? Best way is usually to do this as a brainstorming exercise between the relevant people, that you try and sort out all the ideas and sort them out into financial, technical, or whatever applies, and then decide how likely is something to occur, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, and put that onto a matrix. And anything that gets to 5 out of 5 becomes a danger signal. But it's actually an obligation on all the professions.
Okay. Ken Lever, could you expand on the principal agent's abilities or rights in delegating any responsibilities to junior staff who might be on the site?
Yes, you need to do it in writing. We're back to the authority. You can obviously go and have a company policy, what you do, and the person in charge remains responsible. He cannot get rid of his responsibility, or she, but you can go and say to Joseph, your responsibility now is to go after this, this, and this, and you may do this. You may issue a site instruction, but you may not issue a contract instruction, which probably doesn't solve the problem. He may have to have authority to issue a contract instruction, but then you can delegate that his authority is to do that, but maybe the value of contract instructions is limited to 10,000 rands. But it can be done on paper.
Yeah, okay. I'm just rushing through. I don't know whether we're going to get to all the questions, but Minele Makanya asked an important question. Please clarify what happens to the architect fee where the architect is principal agent by default. In other words, where the letter of appointment is not explicit regarding the PA's role, and how much do you adjust the fee by? Discounted? Are there any adjustments mandatory? Any comments on that?
I think if you look at the PROXA agreement, you've got the role of the architect, or the architect as principal consultant, or the architect as principal consultant, or all three. And you need to go and identify it in that document, and there you can determine the fee that applies to whatever the responsibility is that you're accepting. I can't remember offhand what it says, client architect agreement from SAIA, but the PROXA agreement spells it out quite clearly.
Yes, I think SAICAP says that where the architect is not principal agent, his professional fee for work stage 5 can be reduced by 10%. It doesn't say anything about principal consultancy, and that still needs to be addressed. But I think those fee issues need to be clarified up front. With a quick one, Francois Norkia says, can anyone other than the architect be the principal consultant?
Depends on the type of project. You want somebody who's got that technical knowledge. So if it's an engineering intensive project or process engineering, it should be an engineer of some description. If it's hospitals, the hospital specialists who are not necessarily architects, but a lot of them are architects who specialize, for instance, in hospitals. But you should have somebody with intimate technical ability in that field to be the consultant.
Thanks, Uwe. Ken, thank you. Ken says integrity and honesty are central to being a professional. That's very true. Vishnu Moodley says, good day, Uwe. Zach says, specifically related to the PBA, can practical completion be achieved before snagging and de-snagging? Okay, Uwe, a quick one on snagging and de-snagging, please.
Theoretically, well, the first answer is no such word in the principal building agreements. I don't know what you're talking about. But remember that practical completion is defined as being the state where the facility can be used for its intended purpose. And the word safe is put into the definition. So if the project can be used by the employer for what it's intended for, although it may not be totally complete, and the employer is prepared to accept it and everybody else, then yes, it can obviously be declared practically complete. And just remember, you've also got to get an occupation certificate, which is a separate issue, and that to comply with the law of the country. If that facility is not ready to be used safely, then you can't certify practical completion.
Asanda wants to know, how can the risk of conflict in interest be mitigated when architect is PA and must be accountable for quality of architectural work? How can the risk of conflict of interest be mitigated?
That's not a conflict. That's part of your job. That's not a conflict.
Milani,
unless I didn't understand it.
Sorry, Asanda, we would need a bit more, but unfortunately we're running out of time now. Let's take a last one. Milani wants to know, what has been your experience with record keeping and construction management hardware like Procore and Aconex, which are usually owned and managed by the contractor and through which site instructions are issued and RFIs answered and meeting minutes issued?
I can't answer those two specifically, but there are literally about 10 or 12 packages at the moment. I think you just decide which is the ones that suit you. Unfortunately, the contractors seem to be better organized than the consultants most of the time. That's why they seem to own that sort of software. And of course, they can also sort out their claims better that way. But there are numerous bits of software that they all cost money. They all come off that. You can get a free version of it, but the free version is almost impossible to use in practice meaningfully.
Thanks, Uwe. I said the last one, but let's just deal with these last two quickly. Zach, thank you for your comment. Gerrit Jordan, can the employer refuse to accept practical completion as determined by the principal agent?
Very difficult, because remember, the employer has given the principal agent full authority and obligation to act. And assuming that the principal agent has acted within his professional capability, and there'll probably be a fight whether you did or didn't. Now, is it because the employer is now going to say there's a scratch on this and there's a doodah that's not relevant to being able to use the building? So if he's being petty, that's one thing. If there are genuine reasons why you can't actually use it, then the principal agent probably failed in his professional responsibility.
Okay, thanks, Uwe. Last one. What tool is used to determine the construction time period?
Experience.
Okay. Yeah, experience and maybe consultation with contractors to find out from them, get an input from them. Yeah. But I think that boils down to experience. Colleagues, thank you very, very much for all your questions. And Uwe, once again, thank you so much. It's been intriguing to chat to you. Kurina, do we have another sponsors video, or do we go straight into?
We need to move directly on to Bram, please, Eugene.
Okay, great. Okay, colleagues, now for the order. Okay, Uwe, thanks. Now for the, wouldn't say the main course, now for the nice part. Not that Uwe's wasn't nice, but this is always, let's say, the dessert. Bram, if I can quote you, you describe yourself as a strange combination, and Bram, you please join me. Oh, there we are, okay. Bram describes himself as a strange combination of a collaborative social anarchist, a holistic environmental pragmatist, with acute sense of realness of the world we live in, The quality and aesthetic values of the product that we make and consume is imperative to my thinking. Constantly, I would like to do my part in making a better world for all of us to live in. I am an architect. He completed his studies in 1994. Brahm, that would make it just about 30 years ago, with an open-minded approach, a lot of energy, and a pocket full of sustainable ideas. He designed and built new schools in the Northwest Province for JKD architects. In 1996, Brahm obtained a Fulbright scholarship and traveled to Tucson, Arizona, to complete his master's in architecture from the University of Arizona, focusing on issues pertaining to sustainability. Brahm, I didn't know that you studied in the US, so that must have been very special. Together, Brahm and Andre Extian formed Earthworld Architects, a collaborative group of architects and interior architects that explore ideas around manufacturing, innovative construction, and sustainability from their office in Pretoria. And for those of you who've been with SAIAshare from the beginning, will remember that Andre Extian, Brahm's partner, was our first presenter, SAIAshare #1. Earthworld has received more than 40 awards, both locally and internationally. Brahm's topic is architecture is a hollowed out profession, with architects seemingly less vital than ever. And if that's not the topic, Brahm, then at least that's the question that you're going to be addressing. We look extremely forward to your presentation, Brahm, and so over to you.
Thank you, Eugene, and thank you, Uwe. I'm probably going to bash at the other end of what we are doing. My webcam is off. I would say so.
No, Brahm. Click on the button.
Okay, let me just switch it off. Okay, that's perfect. I'm going to talk a bit about what myself and Andre and our team has been busy with, especially in the last 2 years. And the reason why I got the question here, architects is a hollowed out profession with architects seeming less vital than ever, is I recently read this article in the Zine, and Eleanor Joliffe, in her opening statement, says that architects have somehow become detached from the understanding of construction and engineering that was once at the core of our profession. She says that there's always been architects, and they are a necessary and vital component to human society. And they might not have been called architects from the start, but they were primarily there for the design of shelters and structures, and was always in the part of the construction process. So there we go. So another question is that I think what Einstein said is that maybe we should just look differently and think differently if we want to create a better future in what we are doing. So for the Romans, architecture encompassed everything in the physical and intellectual life of humankind. The architect, he described, designs not only buildings, but military machines, aqueducts, and whole cities. And similarly, this is the Colosseum in Rome, and next to it is a very beautiful building in Rome, Renzo Piana. I just put it in as a building that I really like. But similarly, the ancient Greeks, both Plato and Aristotle, used the term to architect as a verb to describe a form of civic and intellectual leadership that applied great knowledge in practical ways for the common good. And this is the Parthenon in Athens. I just thought when I was there, that guy did a nice march. And then if we go on to Gothic architecture, even during the Middle Ages to High Gothic, the master masons emerged. The knowledge of materials, design and engineering, combining the guide to construction of cathedrals with the skill and beauty they still owe us today. And I think it's really about how do you employ material, technique, technology and people to construct buildings. This is the King's University Chapel at Cambridge, probably one of the finest examples of high Gothic architecture, and where artists achieve the ultimate slenderness in stonework and glass construction. Now, moving on to the Renaissance, I think we see an intellectualization of architecture that begins to divorce the architect from the understanding of material they work with. Even the most artistic of Renaissance architects had the grasp of engineering and how to use materials in the design that they were working with. Similarly, architect like Antoni Gaudi mastered the craft of molding stonework to form space and bring light into space through his understanding of materials. Now, RIBA was formed in the 1800s to begin to regulate the architectural profession. A divisive stand that architects could not join the new society if they had any involvement in any of the building trades. This controversial clause had become about in a well-meaning attempt to distance architects from the rampant fraud in the booming construction industry of the time. This attempt was to protect and professionalize architects, however, started to fracture the overlapping roles between construction and design. The logic is understandable, but the outcome maybe is disastrous. So, looking at our own practice, I would say that in our system thinking and on sustainability, there's obviously three pillars in that. One is environmental resilience, economic demands, and social sustainability. But I think core to all of that is that in our profession, we try to look systemically at things and to try and integrate whole systems into our buildings. Starting with material, as a young architect, you start working with bricks, the most basic of construction materials. This was one of the first projects in the 2000s when the practice started. Later on, you move to materials like concrete and the wonderful pliability of concrete. You learn to work with that. Then making buildings out of steel, trying to get buildings to be lighter, to maybe easier to get the materials onto site, and then a combination of steel and timber. And then recently, in the last couple of years in our practice, we started looking at timber frame buildings, making timber frame buildings in our practice. And in essence, it's in most cases, it's how can you use the material in different ways. So starting with timber construction, there's obviously the traditional ways of making timber buildings. I think timber construction is as old as the world. It was most probably the first buildings that were made on this planet is made out of timber. But I think in the recent 15 years, digital tools and manufacturing of buildings, or digital tools for the manufacturing of buildings, has really quadrupled in availability. And basically, we have integrated design office with the manufacturing office environmentally very quickly. These technologies are now more universally accessible and available to design offices across the world. Looking at our own context, here in the southern point of Africa, we are dealing with large-scale unemployment and low-skilled workforce. The possibility of combining high level of information technologies with low-skilled workforce has now emerged in our current context. And I think in our own narrative, we also believe with our own unique narrative here in South Africa that we can create our own way of building with these modern tools. Now, in terms of the practice, the way that BIM is as used as an integrator of the building process, the integration of BIM in the architect's office with digital manufacturing tools like CNC technologies can then be augmented with low-skilled workforce that has a large potential for our struggling economy. So this is just a diagram illustrating that possibilities. And I think although we build this bricks in South Africa, I think our local systems and thousands, I would probably say at least 80% of buildings in South Africa are actually light frame construction. So it's not that we don't understand that technology in the making. So this whole process started about 5 years ago when we designed the University of Pretoria's Future Africa campus, and we, for the first time, looked at how to integrate BIM and digital design in our office. And this was the first building that was drawn in our office. It was sent to a CNC machine. It was cut and it was made off-site and brought to site and assembled on site. Similarly, the conference center, a short while after that, we built the building in the same manner. And the team that put this conference building together, I'm talking from the timber systems, were really a team of 9 carpenters, fairly low skilled, and you see Marcel there on the right corner. It's the first time that he has assembled a building like that. But I think what was amazing was that with the CNC machine and digital systems in our office, we could produce a very accurate building. So very recently, we bought our own CNC machine and we started our own journey to make these buildings. And I just want to quickly look at a few smaller projects that we've done in the last 2 years. And it's really from, this is the digital design in the office, the digital drawings that are produced. Then it's cut from the machine. This is our joint testing. This is the cutting layouts for the CNC machine. This is the CNC machine for the manufacturing of these components. And then the components are sorted. They are assembled in the workshop and then taken to site and assembled on site. So the very first project that we were involved with was a house in Middelburg, here on the Highveld, and we had to produce these composite birch rafters for this project. This is just during construction, but basically this is the roof system that we've designed. This was the makeup of the rafters, different components. This was the cutting layouts, and just to illustrate the I don't know why this thing is not going, but anyway, this is the dry fit process in the workshop, the making of the finger joints of the beams, the dowel locators to make sure that components fit accurately over each other, and then the assembly of the different parts to build up the beam, the roof rafter beams, and the lamination, and then final finishing. And then we took the first beam to site, and luckily the contractor, we set out the works very carefully. When that rafter came to site, it fitted 100% on the wall plates and on the fixing brackets. So after the fact, we could produce the other 20 beams for the project, and we fairly they put up this roof within a week. We had the roof up, and then in another week the insulations and roof coverings. So it was a very accurate and quick process to assemble this roof on site. And this is some from construction photos, and then finishing off the project to the satisfaction of the client. There's some photos of the process. And then similarly, we went through a process where we were designing the Royal Thai Embassy here in Pretoria, and we had this composite timber portals and structure that had to close off a courtyard between the buildings. And this was the three-dimensional renderings, and then the process on site. In this case, we chose to do a lot of work on site, which I don't think necessarily was very successful. But the nice thing of building with these timber elements is that they're fairly light and they're easily transportable. You don't need cranes. The problem that we sat here with is we chose not to use it on-site crane, so we literally had to carry the different parts through those two sliding doors to get it to the central courtyard. And this is the assembly process on site, and then the final completion of this courtyard. And then that was a primary building elements where we mainly were focusing on roof elements, and then we started looking at whole building systems. And we designed this small coffee shop. It started off as a small coffee shop, and we call it Coast Plaza. That's just the fasteners. This is the wall boxes. This is the assembly on site. The assembly in the factory of components. The assembly of the portal frames. In this case, we use local ply and not the imported birch ply, which made the project much more affordable. This is the different components before they gone off to site. That's the morning when they arrived on site. All of the components neatly packed out, and we achieved to put this whole structure together in one day. A rapid assembly of the parts, adding the insulation to the walls, and then the cladding. So the idea of building a small structure within a day is obviously very important in this thinking in our office at the moment. And then recently we just completed this home in Pretoria, where we've designed home again using our plywood portal system. The bottom or the ground story of the building was a stereotomic structure, brick mortar, and we poured a concrete slab, and then we fitted the portal frames, then the wall boxes, window systems, and then the cladding to the structure. Just some work on the 3D model just to illustrate our process. This is our component assembly drawings to make the building. This is our structural boxes, and then this is one of the main beam structure, carry beams in the system. That's just some drawings, and then the service coordination, obviously, of all services with inside our wall paneling was also important. So obviously, after we've cut these elements from the CNC machine, they were sorted. We assembled the portals on site. There's the portal components. Then started finishing the different parts of the building. This is the beam assembly in the workshop. Again our finger jointing of the different sections, and then these are wall boxes for the walls. In this case, we used oriented strand board for a lot of the wall panels because of cost. You can also see here at the bottom, every item that we cut from the CNC machine is numbered, so that when you start assembling, when they come out of the machine, you know where to fit each of those parts. And then the modular interior, similarly, we designed the modular interior to fit with the modular home. This is just a site prep. That's after they cast the slab. This is where we started putting out the base plates for the portals. The portals arrived on site, what was nice about this process, we just lifted the portals by hand. We didn't have to have a crane on site because the building is very light. and that helps a lot in this in speed of construction to have very light elements, and that's just the finished product of the with the modular interior bookcases that becoming stairs and all sorts of things. And similarly, we recently finished a small shop here in Mainland. Also, again, we assembled the building within 3 weeks. We did the whole building, all the steel works, roof, everything completed. Again, speed of construction is important, and modularity in how things fit together. 100% on site with very little tolerances is important to this game. Again, we've used the main structure, the tree structures we did out of imported birch, and then the wafer roof structure was done with local SA pine. We still have to put the gutter on the building. And then we're similarly now busy with a similar project here at Castlegate as part of the same, let's say, roof system. So I think the key concepts at the end of the day is again material, technique, and technology. How do you employ people's skills in the making of the building? I think what's important is that there's minimal waste when you build buildings like this. Modular and cost effectiveness is important. I think you can generate affordable, durable, lightweight, and flexible building solutions that are financially effective, and the materials are, at the end of the day, not wasted. Parallel manufacturing, the architect has integrated using BIM tools as a digital platform. And I think what is wonderful is that you can use fairly low-skilled labor to assemble the different components. I think we need to, in terms of lightness, we need to build with less material and less resources, that we can bring a design to be lighter. And I think the employment of local materials, local skills, and digital tools can really provide a new platform for our economy to grow. I just lastly want to, I'm always, this is a wonderful slide for me. This coastal community of Makoko, which is in Lagos, Nigeria, this architects, NLE architects, with sponsorship from the United Nations, developed this school that floats on the water. And I think this is really where the architect can really become the sort of inventor, and where they can really illustrate their different way of thinking to make buildings. I sometimes think we always go back to the default position when we design buildings, and we neglect our role as people that can really change our client's mind in doing something in a different way, and not always going to default position. So I would thank you all. I would say keep on thinking, keep on instigating change, and keep on designing if it really matters. Thank you very much.
Ron, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your passion with us, and for sharing your thoughts and your ideas with us. I mentioned to you that architects like pictures, but you went on steroids, and I must say it's been delightful. I don't need to kick off with any question because we have a flood of comments that have come through. So if I may start off with, let's see, Philip de Toy wants to know how far can the plywood roof structures span? And maybe I can just add a thought to that. Who does the engineering for you?
Eugene, we've got different engineers. We've worked quite extensively with Chris Greensmith on that, on both the Potgieter house, the roof beams, and also the house Arrangies. We're still learning a lot about plywood as a structural material. There's not a lot of engineers around that understand, let's call it diaphragm structures, because they, in certain senses, as soon as you start adding the portal to the wall box, it becomes an integrated diaphragm structure. So we're busy learning as we're going, but yes, we have some engineers that we work with in the timber construction. We also involve quite a lot with CLT buildings at the moment, and then they require another set of engineered thinking, because the two technologies are quite different in the way that you use timber.
And maybe just a question then, just to answer, Philip, how far can the structure span? I mean, what are you talking about in terms of capabilities?
So that house Arrangies, the portal structure, there's an 8-meter width portal, and obviously by increasing the depth of the portal column and the portal beam, you can create a larger span. But at the moment, the maximum width that we have achieved with that portal was 8 meters. In the future Africa buildings, the portal span is more than 15 meters, but obviously the structure is much larger. We've used, in that case, we used 3 layers of 30-millimeter birch plywood, which increased the structural depth, structural width, and then the portals are quite large in that construction.
Thanks. Renier Bron says, this is amazing, Bram. Wow. I am in awe. Philip says, thank you, Bram. Question 1, in terms of design coordination with other consultants on roof design, for instance, do you work with structural engineers internally from the start, or do they come in later? So you've addressed that partially. How soon do you involve them, Bram?
Yeah, I think structural engineers, you need to have involved from the word go. I think when it starts, on a residential scale, the other important, well, you have your structural engineer on residential scale, but when it becomes to larger CLT or timber buildings, you have to have the fire engineer also available from the start, because fire and structure is such important parts in timber buildings. You need both of those consultants to work together from the start. But yeah, we try and involve the engineers as quickly as possible in the process, right. Even from the concept design stages. Yeah.
Do you have appeal with municipal approval? How do you deal with that, or are they happy? I mean,
yeah, it depends on the BCO where you're going to file those plans. In Pretoria, we haven't had problems. I think sometimes they, facetiously, I'm going to say this, that they don't look properly at the drawings in front of them. But there's the structural SANS code for framed wooden construction. So at least there's a code for that. There's also the code for CLT. The SANS code for CLT. So both of those codes are available, and you can point to that when you see the BCO. Yeah, but in certain cases you can find yourself that the BCO does not really understand what you're busy with, and they might force you to come up with an Agromar certificate. But in most cases, these constructions that we've done falls, as I said, under the framed timber framed SANS code.
Bram, thank you. Can I just ask you to comment briefly on weatherproofing?
So at the moment, we are trying to keep the timber inside the building. So the house in Murrayfield, we clad it up. We literally kept all the timber inside. We cladded it outside with S-profile sheeting. Obviously, what's important in these is your vapor barriers. So you will have you'll have your insulation layer, and then above your insulation layer you will have your vapor barrier, and then you fit your side rails to fit your cladding onto. Obviously, the detailing of windowsills, the surrounds around the windowsills and flashings are very important, and then things like gable end flashings, those things are really you have to take a lot of care in that. The small coffee shop, mostly a glazed facade on the outside with steel. Again, just the overhang of the plywood coming over. We've used a number of products. One is Timber Life. It's a very good local product. We have used Rubio Monocoat. So we at the moment we're also experimenting with different exterior finishes when it comes to timber cladding. The house that we did a number of years back in Mooikloof, we used finish large for the exterior cladding, and because the wood grows very slow, the timber grows very slow. It's a very hardy pine species, and it's very dense. So in those cases, the cladding has lasted now for almost 8 years without any treatment. But yes, there's a number of treatments on the market that you can look at.
Okay, and just Bram, a quick one. We're going to rush through the questions. Software, what do you use? What software do you use for the cutting of the CNC?
So at the moment, at the moment we for BIM we use ArchiCAD in the office. Then we translate it to Inventor to take to the CNC machine. But yeah, we are in the process of also reviewing different kinds of software so that there's a more of a seamless translation from what is drawn in the office, that you don't have to redraw things when it goes to the CNC machine. So I think at the moment Revit with Inventor is much more seamless than our ArchiCAD and Inventor.
Great. Bram, I'm just going to run through the names. Colleagues, I do hope you'll understand. We'd love to take all your questions. And thank you so much for all the very positive compliments that you've showered on Bram. From Sean Shriven, Bram, I'll ask Kurina to let you have these comments, but comments and compliments from Sean, from Gunther Wagner, Dean Scott Hayward, Hubert Marinus, Renier again, Yusuf, thank you very much. Ken, sorry we can't take that question. Benil Martin, thanks Benil. Yusuf spoke about fire rating the work, but I presume that that's taken care of. Bram,
it's on fire when it's offices and commercial applications. I think you need to consult with a good fire engineer, because they've got quite different offices, especially with escape routes. You need to make sure that in those places you're probably going to cover the timber with a non-combustible material. So you need to when you do those kind of buildings in timber, you need to carefully look at the application or the how you're going to treat those surfaces. They might not be timber at the end of the day.
Kishore Rampal, thank you. Paulo Dematis, thank you very much. Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, Norman Grievers, for your kind comment. Kishore again, Daniel Bueta, Ken Lever again, Colleen has left, Ken Lever again. And so Johan Pansegro, baie dankie Johan. Ibrahim, thank you for your question. We'll pass it on to Bram. Helen Schacht, thank you. Krista, Sonia, and Krishna, John Vizinos, Johan Smith, thank you. Bram, Vivian, thank you. Thought-provoking, Steve Archer, thank you very much. Colleagues, Maneli again, thank you, Maneli. PD, Murar, and so Amruta and Arin Ruth, Mornay Ludik, all of them, thank you and compliments. Colleagues, on your behalf, Bram, once again, thank you. Please stay with us just for another few minutes as I tell you what lies ahead for us, and many more coming through. So Bram, thank you, and you do have a nice weekend. And then that will leave me to, now I must just get back to, let me just see, there we are. What's happened to my script now? Let me just get back to that quickly. Colleagues, I'll be with you in a moment. In the meantime, once again, thank you very, very much to our sponsors and to Bram and Uwe. Our sincere appreciation. This brings us then to the end of another lovely SAIAshare. We do hope that you have enjoyed the afternoon with us. As already mentioned, SAIAshare carries a Category 1 CPD value. We invite you to join us again on the first Friday of December, when we will have another two very interesting hosts. Rodney Harbour, many of you know him as the retired professor from UKZN. He's going to end the year with a bang on our behalf. And then Alan Termersazen, he's a graduate, he's a graduated professional architect with an MBA from WITS and coaching certifications from Australia and the US. And he's going to also give us a lot of food for thought. So that brings us then to the end of SAIAshare. I'm going to end this afternoon's presentation with another quote from Charlie Mackessy's book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. Just a thought to ponder on. Always remember, you matter. You are important and you are loved. And you bring to this world things that no one else can. Colleagues, we hope to see you then on the 1st of December for the final SAIAshare of the year. Do have a pleasant weekend. Keep well.